Is it recording? Yes. Okay, there we go.
I've also hit my local recording as well.
Okay.
I do that as well. Do you want to
Go
sync
ahead.
Aruga? Do you want to sync it? Oh God, hold on. If I could read, I would be doing it.
Mhm.
Do we want to sync? Do you want to sync the locals or?
Yeah, all right. I'll say 3, 2, 1, and we can say so we don't usually do it on this one. I do it on my Monster Hunter one. But what we say is 3, 2, 1, listen, you can.
Does that work as a sync?
Yeah, it works pretty well. But we have
right.
to explain it whenever we have a guest.
You should just absolutely deadpan do it like it's just the industry standard.
Well, yeah, because we've been doing it for like 5 years, so it's really normal to us.
Listen, you can.
Go on, I'll
3, 2, 1. Listen,
you
can't.
We did it with Screbs, and he didn't expect us to all say it so slowly, and he described it as quite sinister.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was kind of slowly, wasn't it? Okay.
There you go. Enjoy that.
Right. Yeah, now we've got some nice compromising audio of you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've never used that word before up to now. So, is there what about the pod? Is there an explicit tag, or do you keep it clean?
No,
we say
we're very
horrible things.
explicit.
Okay, cool.
Every now and then we have a guest on and we have
Good.
to behave ourselves, but I assume that's not going to be a problem with yourself.
No. It's good. I can use a swear word instead of a comma or a pause now. That's good, which is what.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what all Brits do. So
yeah.
I think my dad complained about the Apollo 13 episode.
Was that particularly?
Yeah,
because
I don't remember it being particularly rude, but I guess I had something to out of my system
at a temple, right? So, that's just sitting around like, drinking in a temple, basically. So, who knows what's going to happen in that case? Oh, that's legit in Japan. You can do that.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. They just sort of. Most people aren't religious. They just sort of go to temples because they're nice and a nice place to sort of sit and hang out. So no one really cares if you sit on the corner and drink some
Could
tins.
not do that in England, man. Yeah, come to church where you can drink. Imagine the fucking chaos. Absolutely worst possible idea.
People would go to church more and more happily.
I take 5 or 6 disguises so I can have the wine multiple times.
Yeah. It's neck in it.
Well, Christmas, you got all the altar boys and girls chugging port in the back, right? So
yeah,
maybe in America.
Imagine you doing like communion, but instead of like a sip and then a biscuit, it's like one full glass of wine and just like a hunk of bread. And you're just like tearing it off with your teeth.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
This tequila is my blood, and this lemon is my body.
And the salt's the Holy Spirit. There's only 3.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorted.
Luke, we never discussed anyone doing a plot, and I certainly didn't. But
this is not one that I think I can do the plot off the top of my head. So I guess we'll record it later and insert it.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
The way the format usually works, Gary, we do a little introductory part, how we came to the film, whatever.
Yeah.
Then there's like one of us recites the synopsis.
Mm.
And then after that, it's just all bets are off. There's no spoiler warning or anything. It's just we discuss the film as it comes up.
I usually at some point hear myself going, and asking a question, and then I know I can like do a little edit point there if I need to. So
yeah. You could do like you could pepper the synopsis in pieces throughout it, completely out of order, just to honor the nature of the story, right? That'd just be annoying, but
say things we remember out of the movie every here and again.
God, the film. Got through that. I've never seen it before. Wow.
Did I say book or movie? I don't
know. we'll sort of touch on the movie, but I assume we're mostly going to talk about the book.
Yeah.
We can go through, whatever you like. Yeah, I've got both. I thought it'd be useful as I was reading it to take photos of quotes that I liked, and then I just started taking photos of the pages No, I realize I've got way too many. But hey, it's all good.
Right. There's some good stuff in there. You have to find a way to leave it in, Matt. Anyway, I'll do my dumb opening that I do. In the year 1922, Kurt Vonnegut was born.
Hey, it's 2022, I think.
Oh, did I just say? Did I say 19 or 20?
I think you said 1922.
Okay, good.
I think you got the year right. Don't second guess yourself 5 seconds into the podcast. Howdy, folks. This is Matt here.
This is Luke.
This is a Sci-Fi sanctuary. It's one where we are celebrating Dancing in Circles for the 100th birthday of the now departed Kurt Vonnegut and his iconic book, film, whatever it is, Slaughterhouse 5. I see. I've already forgotten how to say it in German, except for the Fünf part. Hof, not Schlausen. I don't remember. Schlachtenhof Fünf. There we go. I got the Hof and the Fünf fine, but I forgot the slaughter. Forgot to slaughter today. Okay.
Everyone forgets the slaughter. That's kind of the point of the book.
Oh yeah.
So I first became aware of this book when listening to the podcast Donut Plains. And this book was introduced to me not in my school or by anything sensible, but as a sort of side comment by our guest today, Gary Dutton.
Hello, how are you? Sorry about that, Luke. Sorry you had to find out that way, but good way as anyway.
It was literally a week after I'd visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So
Right.
altogether, it was quite an experience and rewrote
That's
my
a trio.
entire understanding of World War II.
Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and then an episode of Donut Plains. That's how it goes.
Yep.
No, I did have the high school run-in with this one, which I think is pretty common for Americans. It's like, here's a list of 5 books, and obviously the one called Slaughterhouse 5 is going to catch your attention, so you're going to read that for your book report. And then I read all of Vonnegut's books, and at my university, Vonnegut is one of the guys I had to shepherd around when I worked for the University Union, so I had a couple actual chats with the dude, but he was like the first kind of prominent person I met, so I was like way too like not knowing how to deal with that, right?
Wow, it's incredible. So you got to speak to him.
Yeah. After he did his little speech, and then I had to take him back to the hotel or whatever. So, perfectly fine dude.
Definitely.
But I was definitely in like all mode at the time because it was the first time I had done that. So
Yeah, I can imagine. I would be exactly the same. And I'm not usually like about that, but he's one of those guys who just like, yeah. As we'll get on to, obviously.
Although I've seen a lot of people have shared online, like he was very good at replying to letters and getting in touch with people and stuff. I think he would actually have hated to have been considered in awe.
Yeah, definitely.
I was 19 years old or whatever. I was a dumb kid, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I found it. I don't know when, but it's just in my 20s, and rereading it for this, it must have been 10 years since I've read it. And I definitely loved it at the time, and it's one of those things. But I thought, I wonder if it's one of those things where you go back to it and you're like, your tastes have totally changed, and you're like, oh, this is a bit cringe now, or it's a bit simple or whatever. Because I've just not touched anything of his for that long, and going back over it, I was like, oh no, this is just unbelievable. Every single page, it's got something quotable on it. It's spectacular. So he has not disappointed me, a decade plus later.
No, I way jumped the gun this spring because we first, it's 1922, we have to do this year. So I read it back in like March, and then I read like Sirens of Titan, Cat's Cradle, Mother Night, and Breakfast of Champions, like all this year, but like 6 months ago.
Still good research.
Yeah, but that's the thing, I couldn't just read just one, right? I had to read all 5 of his 60s novels.
This is currently still the only book of his I've read.
Okay, I would refer you to Cat's Cradle for number 2, or Mother Night if you're just into the war thing.
Yeah. Well, I was disappointed when I looked up the guy and discovered that he's just a fictional character made up for this and Mother Night.
Oh, Campbell?
Yeah.
Now we do have to start talking about movies, and the Mother Night movie is pretty good. I think is it Nick Nolte maybe playing Campbell, and it's good because there's a Breakfast of Champions movie with Bruce Willis that's a train wreck, even though the the book's good. And then we have this movie, which is kind of an oddity, I guess. It's kind of like the I feel like it's the special visual model to go with the book or something. It doesn't really seem to be its own thing.
It's the most 70s ass thing I've ever seen in my life. It's good God. It's like I saw towards the end I sort of warmed to it, but a lot of the shots where they sort of establish in location go on for, I would say, 40 seconds too long, where they're just like, we're in the train yard, like, oh yeah, so here's the train yard, still the train yard. Yeah, you're still in the train yard. It's like 20 seconds and again. Now it's another cut, another angle of the train yard, and nothing's different. You're like, okay, we get it. We're in the train yard, guys. We got that. A lot of classical music as well, which I presume is a budget.
Yeah, that's usually the case.
Thing, and way too loud in the mix. Just really loud classical music over everything for ages. It's one of my takeaways from it.
It's kind of funny.
We're talking making me watch sci-fi movies from the past century has desensitized me to all of this. We have watched so much boring 70s shit that I don't even notice anymore.
Yeah, I was just like, it feels 70s, but the weird thing about this and being a sci-fi sanctuary is the movie kind of un-sci-fi's it, because in the book it's very clear that Billy Pilgrim walks through a door and he's in a different time and place, whereas this it almost feels like like Tarantino style, non-linear cross-cutting, right? You don't
it's a bit sorry, cool.
Oh no, I'm just saying you don't get that like kind of like through line that you get with the book, but which I don't know if you could in a movie.
I think the problem is it kind of clashes. I don't know how you do it differently, but I think the problem is when you put it into a movie, it just looks like a technique. So you kind of lose the idea that he's sort of drifting between places. It looks more, as you say, it looks more like you're cutting between timelines, and it's not as clear, because that's a technique you see in films all the time, especially looking at it with modern eyes as well. That's jumping between things is something you see quite a lot. So you don't sort of go, oh, he's going through time. Like if you like if you watch Pulp Fiction, like you say, you're not going, oh, they're traveling backwards and forwards through time. It's not that. It's just the film's in a different order, right? So it doesn't come across as particularly at all.
They put in one or two moments which I don't think were in the book, where like he'll say something in the past that he learned in the future and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think they were trying to reinforce the time travel thing by doing that.
Yes, there's things that are we going to get onto the problems we're having with it now? Is that too early to start?
I'm quite happy to get the film out of the way and just talk about the book. So go right ahead.
So one thing that grated on me pretty badly was when they're on the plane, the optometrists convention, when they're flying there on the plane. He has also something that's really, really made me laugh for the first hour of this film is if you haven't, it really presumes you've read it.
Right.
If you're coming to this without reading it, it is the most batshit mental thing you'll ever see. Because there's loads of references, and if you don't know them, you will have no idea what's going on. Things happen. There's a bit where I think it's supposed to be in the book. Billy's being marched through Dresden, I think, when they arrive there. I think that's right. And an old German man sees his coat and it looks ridiculous, so he thinks he's come here to take the piss, like he's being a clown about the whole war. So he's furious, and he comes up and slaps him and goes, "Do you think this is funny? Do you think this is a joke?" And in the film, it's at the end of this, like, I don't know, 90-second, again, way too long sequence of them walking through to really, really badly mixed, really loud classical music, and some children start sort of dancing around him, and he looks at them, and it keeps cutting to an old German man looks annoyed, and you think, what? Why? And then the music gets interrupted because the guy walks up to him and just gives him a big slap, and the music stops abruptly, and he just shouts something in German, and that's the end of that bit. And if you've not read the book, you're just like, what the the fuck is going on? What's this? And there's so many moments like that in the first hour that are just so weird without context. They try and do the bit with the homeless guy in the trains that's traveling with them in the prisoner train. I mean, and in the book that is. I mean, there's so many funny things about that. It's so makes me laugh so much because he's so annoying. He just keeps going, "This ain't nothing. I've been on the streets for. You think this is bad? I've seen worse than this. I've lived in worse conditions than this," and he won't shut up, right? And then he's dead. And then it's just sort of, it's a really funny black humor bit. But again, in the film that does not come across because they don't give anything the time to breathe. They try and fit loads in, but nothing has the time to breathe, so nothing actually works. It's just a series of confusing events, essentially. But no, sorry, the plane thing I was going to say is when he's on the plane, the optometrist plane, Billy suddenly has that flash forward of what's going to happen. He sees the ski men, that's the official term, isn't it? The ski men.
Yeah.
He sees the rescue skiers stood in the leaving party, doesn't he? So, and then he goes, "The plane's going to crash. The plane." But the whole point of Trafalmador is that he's completely serene with it. He knows it's going to crash, and he's fine with it, and it always does. And there's nothing in the book where he suddenly gets terrified and says, "You have to stop the plane," because he knows what's going to happen, and he's just. So that was a really weird liberty they took there because it kind of changes the whole story, right?
Yeah,
I guess it takes out any dramatic, pull you would have on screen because, like, in the book, it is like he's playing a role every time he enters a different scene in his life. It's like, well, now it's time to play this role. Now it's time to play that role. Whereas here, maybe he's actually trying to change things, but that's impossible.
A lot of basically all the problems I have with the film are where it's trying too hard to be a film in a way that the book can't. Like, there's a line I think where Vonnegut actually says, like, this story doesn't have characters, but the film tries really hard to make them into characters. So, like, Tony Lazzaro is like, complete. Like in the book, he's this scrawny little nothing who's making all these completely empty threats.
Yeah,
but the film makes him like a real tough guy. Like he could have stepped out of The Godfather.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't even get injured in it. It doesn't get, no one roughs him up or anything, which is another weird decision. Yeah. Again, taking some of the jokes out of it. It's weird.
Well, let's give everyone a giant headache and do a quick plot summary on this one.
Oh, I'd assumed you'd already stuck that in somewhere because we've gone on for ages.
But bam, now it goes here.
Okay, yeah, non-linear.
I want to get a little bit more just about the film before we really do the book. I brought up some names. Sorry if you're hearing my click clacking. I'm in emergency iPad mode. So yeah, director. Okay, the director is George Roy Hill, who is a notable director. He did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting. So there's reason to assume that this film might have been more successful than it was. The World According to Garp. Oh, Slapshot. That's a fun one. So yeah, he made lots of really good films, but yeah, this one is a little bit of a. I mean, again, you can tell there's like some thinking here. There's some art here, but it doesn't really gel together in the end. But it's not from having a lack of a decent hand on the movie.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's just a terrible idea to try and make a film with this book because all the story and all the point of it is in the narration, right?
Yeah.
It's in the Vonnegut's narration and the way he describes things and the fact that it's like he is explaining things to an alien or to someone who has no idea.
Oh, this is wild. I'm looking at the music, and they were not using stock music. The music from this movie is actually played by Glenn Gould, who's one of the major pianists of the mid 20th century. So they got a very class guy to do this. He's playing all Bach, but
that is wild.
Which might be why it's so high in the it's like now getting Yo-Yo Ma to do your soundtrack. You put him up in the soundtrack,
This is just the director saw an excuse to hire someone he likes, I think.
Yeah. Well, he'd already made Butch Cassidy, so he had his blank check, right?
God, maybe that's why some of those establishing shots are so long, because they want to like let the piece play out, because you need to do it the classical, don't you? You can't just have a couple of bars of it. You need to let it breathe, right? But it's just just feels forced and strange. It really does.
Well, here we go. I opened up the IMDb, Matt, to sort of join you in this, and here's something from the trivia. And so it goes appears 100 times in the novel. It's not uttered even once in the movie.
Yeah.
Or Putu tweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they take out the epitaph. Everything is beautiful and nothing hurt.
Yeah.
The Serenity Prayer is not in it.
Yeah.
Which is like a major theme.
I mean, this has always been on my list of the unfilmable books, even though there is a movie for it. This On the Road, I don't even think anyone's tried to make a movie for On the Road, Kerouac's book. 1984 doesn't have a definitive film version. I mean, there's the one they made in 1984. Visually, it's cool, but still, you have to, I mean, when a third of that book is just somebody going on about, the philosophy of the state, it's hard to make a movie of it.
Yeah.
Or you could just have them make it. Maybe they did make a giant speech. It's been a while. I've read 1984 probably like 8 times. I've watched the movie once. So
yeah, I think I watched chunks of the movie and I didn't feel that I needed to see any more, to be honest. Yeah.
I watched like a possibly not official videotape of the film.
Okay.
I was like, I think I prefer the book.
I mean, I guess dystopias are a little hard to do until recently. Now you can have, the virtual sets and we still got to write a script, which people tend to forget to do sometimes. But I wonder if you could take on something like Brave New World and make a better film than has been attempted. I think that one's just like TV movies in the past.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's such a huge sci-fi resurgence at the moment and a lot of budget thrown into those things, massive Netflix and Amazon Prime sci-fi stuff that you could see it happening. You could see them setting up a world. And also it'd be the case that you would do it as an ongoing series, because then you can take the time to establish a universe, as it were, which something like that would need. So then you can sort of get into okay, I see what this place is about, and that can take the place of what a narrative might do in a novel, instead of having to rush it through.
I'm having a look at the actors in here, and despite the fact that his last movie was Robert Redford and Paul Newman, there's not any particularly well-known folks in here. Okay, yeah, Michael Sachs is Billy Pilgrim. He's best known for Slaughterhouse 5. So
the chap playing Edgar Derby really reminded me of Cole Meany all the way through the film.
Oh yeah, for sure. So and that's the other one where none of these. He was the original Ajax man in 1970s television commercial. So that's the kind of notoriety we're finding here.
Incredible. The original, though, to be fair.
Would a few familiar faces help in this film?
The only one I do kind of recognize was the guy playing Lazaro, because I think he plays essentially the same character in a bunch of other stuff.
Best known for his 1993 performance in Angels in America. Okay, won a Primetime Emmy Award for something. So he certainly sounds more notable than everyone else's here.
Oh, I've just realized what I recognize him from, and it's actually quite embarrassing.
Oh, yeah?
Rachel's dad in Friends.
What? Is he?
Yeah.
No way. Wait.
Sure, why not?
Looking that up. Oh my God, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, this is me Googling.
Oh, just in response to your earlier statement.
Holy shit.
I'm back on the music a bit here. It was this wiki sentence: the prolonged rendition of the final movement of Bosworth Brandenburg Concerto accompanies the cinema montage as the main character first encounters the city of Dresden. So even wiki's got to be, yes, it is prolonged.
Yeah, that's as much shade as a wiki is allowed to throw.
Yeah. Factual shade. Oh, that's blown my mind, that Rachel Green's dad.
But yeah, usually managed to dig up something a little more interesting than that for our actors. But I guess that's what you get on this one, huh?
Yeah. I will say, I think Michael Sachs is too handsome to be Billy Pilgrim.
Yeah.
He can play play Goofy quite well. Like, he had the right vibe in how he was acting, but he just didn't look like enough of a weed. He had too much of a jawline.
And later on as well, when he's playing the middle-aged Billy Pilgrim, he doesn't have what I have in my head of that complete listlessness, like a man that's just going through the motions. He's a mess. He's just, he'll let anyone just walk over him. He goes to his job day in, day out. He's not really, like, his family are there and they exist, but he couldn't really give a shit either way. They're just, you know, they're just there, part of this almost matter of fact life that he has, because, you know, PTSD, you know, and that's something they don't really pick up on in the film either. They don't really, that's not a theme, I don't think.
Well, one of the biggest things, I guess we start moving into the book. In the book, a lot of things that the Tralfamadorians do and say directly mirrors things the Germans do and say when they take him prisoner.
Yes.
And we don't really see or hear much from them in the film at all. So what can you do?
No, it's like wildly left field once we get to them in the movie. So it's like, what, huh? Because the book, I think the book doesn't, within the first few pages, it pretty much lays out all the scenarios, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like we do in this podcast, it gives you the whole plot in the first page and then just discusses it for the rest of the book.
It's almost like the movie tries to biopic it more. It's like, we can't put the philosophy on screen properly, so we'll just kind of make this is like Billy Pilgrim's biopic, which, you know, that's the questionable genre of movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I appreciate the failed experiment thing of the movie. I still find the movie somewhat fascinating because of how they tried to do it. But yeah, you just, you know, a few minutes ago, you just named like 8 major lines that simply aren't in the movie. It's like, what? I guess the book hadn't firmly entrenched itself in the counterculture yet. I don't know.
This wasn't that long after the book, right?
Yeah, the book was 66, I think.
So yeah, it's only 6 years old. So I assume it wasn't like taught in schools or anything yet. And in fact, being an anti-war book released during Vietnam, I think it was probably pretty buried.
Sorry, 69. It was very close to.
Wow.
To the movie. So yeah.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have thought they wouldn't have thought we have to put these lines in the movie yet. Which now, if you were to do this, you'd have. I mean, again, you'd be crazy not to. You know.
Yes. But yeah, that whole thing of the main, because I think the whole point of the trauma and the PTSD is that I think there's only a hint of doubt for me that the whole thing isn't just in his head. It's almost not a sci-fi novel, I think.
Right.
Because it's you know, the everything, as you say, like there's lots of links. So they say there's a part in the book where where Vonnegut describes the markings on the trains as being orange and black, the passenger trains, the prisoner trains, so that the bombers won't target them, to say this is a prisoner train, don't bomb it, right? And then in the next chapter, he is at his daughter's wedding, and the gazebo outside is striped orange and black, and that's when he has to go. He has a dizzy spell and he has to go upstairs, and he becomes unstuck in time, right? That's clearly a traumatic response, a trigger, right? And it's discussing that kind of thing. And there's other bits that are like that, but it's just, to me, that says that there's very little room. It doesn't completely explicitly say this is definitely not happening to him. But things like that, and the fact that it's like Billy is this very average guy, right? There's lots of themes in there about the average guy, and people talk about the average guy and no characters, right? That I think links into the fact that the aliens he meets has the stupidest fucking name. Like, it's such a rubbish name, right? And that's definitely on purpose, because it's come from his imagination, and that's as good as his imagination can muster. The Tralfamadorian, you know, it's just a mess of, you know, syllables, isn't it? It's nothing. It's like, and then
Douglas Adams would have approved.
Yeah. And he imagines them as little like plungers, doesn't he, with one hand and an eye? It's like a really sort of basic idea, right? And I think that's,
I did see
in my
a
opinion,
real English teacher take on the Tralfamadorians, which was that they're shaped like plungers because they are unclogging his memories for him, the way a plunger unclogs a toilet.
I'm reasonably sure Vonnegut wasn't thinking about that, but hey, no. Subconsciously. But yeah, with saying it's all in his head, I mean, I don't know. My brain is notoriously wired a little differently, but I have like major points in my life where it was just a seared, burned memory that I can kind of return to, at any point in time. My 6-year-old, birthday party, shortly before leaving Japan the first time, I just have about a minute of rolling down on my bicycle down a dark street that's just like permanently, seared into memory, and I kind of return to that anytime, Well,
I think the real point is it doesn't matter if it's real, because if he is time traveling or if he's not, both are just a coping mechanism to help him deal with the realities of what he went through.
Yeah.
So it's ultimately like, I don't think we're supposed to be too concerned with whether it's real. It's about what he takes from it.
Yeah, the coping mechanism. And I think the book itself is a coping mechanism for Vonnegut.
Well, there's a whole chapter from his point of view about how hard it was to write this book and how he had to do it in this.
And he tells it really off as well.
Yeah. He's like, I tried to make the book interesting, but and I make it seem bleak and pointless in the book, but it was even more bleak and pointless in my actual experience.
Yeah. Which peppers the humor through it, and which is just astonishing. The way he can go from making you absolutely piss yourself 1 second, and the next page you're ashen. There's a bit where you see. I took some quotes, but I took too many, and now I don't know where they are because I didn't order them properly. But there's a bit about where he talks about. He completely makes up this bit about a photographer. So it's 2 years after the invention of the daguerreotype, the first photography. And the guy's assistant, whose name's escaping me right now, he claims that this guy's assistant was arrested 2 years later after the invention of the daguerreotype for trying to sell a picture of a woman
with a pony,
with a pony in front of 2 Doric columns and a plant pot. Right, and he just presents it as fact, but it's so mischievous because he doesn't. There's no like. Hint until slightly later on that it's not true. And it's just so good. And like there's a bit, I'm trying to find it, I'm sorry. That was it. So yeah, he totally presents it as fact, and then he gets just silly enough to let you know that this isn't true, because it almost sounds feasible. You're like, well, of course that'd be what happened as soon as people could make photographs. They start trying to make dirty things with it, right?
They talk about stranger in fiction. When I was doing my student teaching, I had a few teachers I was working under. One of them was the cool teacher, right? And he didn't seem to like me that much, and kind of like was like, I guess it's kind of like a suggestion I couldn't pass. And I was like, God, what did I do? The other teachers seemed to like me pretty well. 2 years later, I turn on the news. The guy's been arrested, has been fired, and is going to jail for trying to diddle the girls' basketball team. So I was like, okay. I guess, now the wheel of karma has turned.
I'm pretty glad that guy didn't like me.
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay. That means I must be okay, right?
Yeah, really. That was the same teacher I referred to before that spent an entire day playing Dark Side of the Moon with the Wizard of Oz. Subtext doesn't go together. I've seen it like 6 times now. It does not work unless you're really, really, really high, which maybe he was.
And he was like, I get this now. I found that bit. So yeah, Andre Lefebvre was his assistant, but he wasn't. No such person existed as the assistant to him at all. And then it says, so he gets arrested. Apparently, it says Lefebvre argued that the picture was fine art and that his intention was to make Greek mythology come alive. He said the columns and the potted palm proved that. When asked which myth he meant to represent, the further replied that there were thousands of myths like that, with a woman a mortal and the pony a god. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison. He died there of pneumonia. So it goes. He just adds just enough stupidity on the end to let you know he's
I just assumed that was all fact.
And 40 years later, they made Caligula.
Yeah. There's a bit he entirely fabricates just for the sake of it, just to be cheeky.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Well, again, the book is entirely fabricated. It's a work of fiction, except for the last chapter where he says, "No, here's what's really happened, and it was kind of dull. I needed to spice it up a bit."
Well, the one or two moments where Vonnegut appears during the narrative, I've always assumed they were somewhat true. Because it's only like once or twice. He's like, there'll be a character says something. He's like, "That was me. I was there."
Yes.
So I assume those really
Vonnegut,
happened. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's him saying, "This happened around me." I think he's saying, most of the trains and all the sort of key bits in Dresden, were things he experienced, but because they're too traumatic and painful, he's got this. He's distancing himself from the events by being like, whenever you hear about him as himself in the book, he's a few feet away from Billy. So in the train cart, when it opens and they see Dresden, he says it's like Oz, right? And it's the second city. And he said that was my voice. He's a few steps behind him, basically. So he's always, that's that distancing to protect himself while he's writing about this thing, because, as you see at the end, he was part of the body cleanup crew, and he had to drag bodies out from underneath the bombs. The bombing. It's not
layers, layers and layers and layers, because it's not Kurt Vonnegut's story, it's Billy Pilgrim's story, and then Billy's not seeing it directly; he's seeing it through time travel and through this layers of metaphor. It's like a basilisk or something. You can't look directly at it; you have to look at it through a mirror, through another mirror, to lessen the effect. And I think that makes it more impactful than if it was just a dry description of horrible things that happened.
Definitely,
because it helps you. It humanizes it in a way that it wouldn't if it was just like, I went to Dresden and here's what happened and it was terrible for 100 pages.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like we say, that he weaves it in perfectly, that idea of like trauma triggers and things like that, because there is, I can't remember whose breath is described as smelling like roses and mustard gas. It's quite early on.
I think it's either Billy or Vonnegut himself when they drink.
Yeah, and then he refers to it right at the end when he's talking about the smell coming out of the bunkers when they take the bodies out, and they're like, okay, that's why that scent is so familiar to So there's a lot of that throughout it. Actually, you see it a lot of, and like all the themes where small icons turn up throughout different passages of time that you see, whether they're the photograph or little markings, or the orange and black and all those sorts of things. They pop up everywhere.
That reminds me, I was just looking up, so I make sure I got it right. My favorite weird factoid about Vonnegut, and then makes you wonder if the smell thing had to do with that. I'll read, this is from a Reddit, but I remember hearing the fact like a very long time ago. Kurt Vonnegut's high school nickname was Snarf, because his classmates noticed him continually sniffing his armpits. So in his graduating class of 1940, he is listed as Kurt Snarfield Vonnegut Jr. That being a real fact.
That's incredible.
But that's a very Billy Pilgrim thing, right? Just some of the weirdness of Billy Pilgrim would come straight from Vonnegut, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
you don't.
He's
write
very
a
much
book
an
like
outsider.
This if you're Mr. Normal.
Yeah, he's very much an outsider, isn't he? And he feels that, and that comes out through Pilgrim as well. The other thing, unless I'm misremembering, I did watch the film just today, but do they mention Kilgore Trout at all?
I don't think so.
I think he, like, you see a copy of a book because he is in hospital next to the guy who reads books. So I think there was like a little cameo. He's reading a Kilgore Trout book, but yeah, Rosewater, yeah, that's the one.
Which is kind of a major part of it. Isn't
well,
it?
also, yeah, that's another way that it tells you that this is probably all in Billy's head, is that he read all of it in Kilgore Trout books.
Yeah, there's a book he reads in the dirty shop that is like, oh, I've read this one before, and it exactly describes the situation he is in on Trafalmador when he's in the dome with everyone, in the zoo with I've forgotten the name, the
Montana Wildback.
Thank you. Yeah, Montana Wild Hack, isn't it?
Wild Hack, yes.
She's a fantastic.
Montana Wildback is one of her moves.
Yeah.
It's exactly that, isn't it? I also don't think Kurt Vonnegut liked Sci-Fi that much, even though he wrote it, because like the character of Kilgore Trout, which I looked up today, is based on sort of a friend and rival he had who was also writing Sci-Fi at the time, who was called, because his last name was a fish name. I've forgotten.
Okay.
My brain is absolutely rubbish.
Kilgore Trout himself shows up in Mother Night, and he's completely reprehensible, and everyone hates him, and he can't sell his books. Like Billy Pilgrim's like the only guy, and the guy in Mother Night, they're like the only people. Campbell are the only people reading his books.
So good.
He's like,
and he's in Breakfast of Champions as well, which is another one of his that I've read. And again, he's just awful, and no one can.
Highly unsuccessful.
Books. Yeah, but yeah, it was a. It was essentially, yeah, here we go. I'm just looking up again. Sorry.
It's like baffled someone read his books.
Yeah. It was, that's right. So the real guy's name is Theodore Sturgeon.
Okay.
and he found it so funny, his name. He's got his last name is a fish, that he just basically, he never said until after he died, admitted that was who it was this guy called Theodore Sturgeon, who was also writing Sci-Fi at the same time as he started writing it. And he just took the piss out of him via Kilgore Trout, this really horrible man who's got like messing around with children on paper rounds and being awful to them. He's just this bit. So he admitted it afterwards, and he stated in a 1987 interview, he said, yeah, it said so in his obituary in the New York Times. I was delighted that it said in the middle of it that he was the inspiration for the Kurt Vonnegut character of Kilgore Trout. Just delighted that he got that into his obituary.
I think Vonnegut's hat trick was, say Stephen King suddenly decides to write a romance or something. People are like, what? Oh, that's a wild shift of genre. Where Kurt Vonnegut, well-known sci-fi writer, but he kind of finessed it where, like Slaughterhouse 5, it's like, is this sci-fi? I'm not quite sure. And then, by the 70s, you're getting books that clearly are not sci-fi. They're just kind of like weird social satire that feels like sci-fi.
Yes. Yeah. He definitely took I think he saw something wrong with the way sci-fi was going, and he wanted to put his spin on it, which he did beautifully, of course. That's the masterpieces he's written. But I think that's why Kilgore Trout is so rubbish. He writes such terrible rubbish all the time. And there's a quote in here about, he said, Kilgore Trout was more or less invented by a friend of mine, Knox Berger, which is another insane name, but who was my editor in the early days. He did not suggest that I do this, but he said, the problem with science fiction, it's much more fun to hear someone tell the story of the book than to read the story itself. And it's true. If you paraphrase a science fiction story, it comes out as a very elegant joke, and it's over in a minute or so. It's a tedious business to read all the surrounding material. So I started summarizing them. And I suppose I've now summarized 50 novels I'll never have to write and spared people the reading of them.
I mean,
basically why Kilgore Trout's there.
That perfectly explains why I haven't read much Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah.
That's it. You've got the story. You don't need the stuff around it.
Yeah. And even what was it? Because a few years ago, I read Dune, and Luke was like, "Yeah, I've only read the first one. I've never really gotten into the other Herbert novels." Like, I'm gonna just knock through them, and about 50 pages into Children and Dune or whatever the second one is. I was like, pretty much finished. So now in a few years, I'll probably go back and read the first one again.
Yeah, I've read the first one like 3 or 4 times in my life. And every single time they'd be like, well, I'll read the sequels. Now just read the synopses on Wikipedia.
See, I thought it was whack when you told me that, and it's like, oh, that seems to be exactly what I'm doing, even though I have the complete series on, well, the complete Frank Herbert series on my iPad.
Yeah.
I didn't get the later ones by his son and whoever else.
So
Like,
something.
Go ahead.
I was going to go like take us way different tangent now. So
That's fine.
This book predates the term PTSD.
Right. But it describes it.
It describes it very well.
When he wrote it, people were coming back from Vietnam, clearly with it and not being treated well by, they're not getting a hero's welcome. So kind of doubling down and some of them probably were scumbags, but a lot of them were not,
Oh yeah. So yeah, I think it's very.
Yeah. And I have that particular quote to hand this time. This I thought was amazing, like to describe without having the terminology of PTSD or trauma to describe it. Because this is some time later when they're singing, when that quartet are singing, the Febs, the Four-Eyed Bastards.
Yeah.
Great. And for some reason it starts to upset him, and he doesn't know why. He's like, why am I so upset by this? I don't have an old gang or whatever. What is this? And the quote is, everyone's saying, you all right? Yeah, I'm okay. You look so awful. Really, I'm okay. And he was too, except that he could find no explanation for why the song had affected him so grotesquely. He had supposed for years that he had no secrets for himself. Here was proof that he had a great big secret somewhere inside, and he could not imagine what it was. That's perfect. That is perfect description of latent trauma, isn't it? It's incredible.
I'm looking for the polar opposite here. I think. That's a different book. I think it's a Flannery O'Connor story. I just looked up the wrong title, but it's the one where basically someone has been the city's hero. He saved a few lives. He's in the hospital now. And they start talking to him before the press is going to come interview him, and they realize that he's a reprehensible asshole. So the dark ending of the book is someone just kind of, in Twilight Zone fashion, kind of nudges him out of the window, so he just dies and stays a hero.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's like, okay, everyone thinks he's a hero. Now let's not let them find out the truth.
Right. Well, yeah, it's the sort of thing that would happen in a Vonnegut book. But Vonnegut is very much against the idea of heroes, I think. There's the whole section at the start where his friend's wife is convinced that that's what he wants to write, is a book about what big damn heroes they were.
Yeah. And she's furious about it.
And I'm sitting here thinking it's Flannery O'Connor, but now I'm also thinking, is that from the Monkey House book? And because I would have read all that stuff at the same time. It might be Vonnegut himself who had that particular thought. I failed in my little research here, so if I got that wrong. But the point was the core of the story, right? That I'm just sitting here thinking, what kind of person is Billy Pilgrim? Is he like, if you meet Billy Pilgrim, what is your take on this dude?
I get the impression you're not able to have a take on Billy Pilgrim. He's one of those guys who just exists.
Yeah, he's also here, sort of thing.
There's a friend of mine growing up. I'm pretty sure no one from this friendship group's listens to this podcast. But the running joke was just like, we would be describing a night out and we'd list the people who were there, and we'd always forget he was one of them. Because he's just, oh yeah, I guess he was also there. And he's just like, he didn't really have a sense of humor or a personality or would do anything. He was there too.
Just a participant.
Yeah.
So maybe you wouldn't dislike Billy Pilgrim, he'd just be there.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Because it does, apart from like one or two people in the war when he was being a hindrance, you don't get the impression that the characters dislike him or that they like him or that they notice him.
Yeah, I think, anything that happens to him is a reflection of the personality of the person inflicting it on him. So the kid in the trenches when they're behind enemy lines, my memory's dying.
Weary, is that Weary?
Roland Weary, thank you. Yeah. He's got a weird thing where he's trying to keep him alive, but he's also just infuriated by him and wants to. He's only dragging him along so he can like scare him and show him all his weapons and say I'll stab you at some point, and you know, and indeed he goes to beat the shit out of him at one point. You know, but Billy's just a completely passive factor in that, so it's nothing to do with who Billy is, because he is almost like the perfect nobody, because all this person's doing is exercising his demons on this training dummy, right? He's nothing in that interaction. He's just the other thing to interact at. Almost.
Even down to his wife, who does adore him. Like, she doesn't necessarily adore him for anything that he is, just because he's willing to marry her.
That's true. Yeah, she's saying, I thought nobody would ever marry me. So she's the joy she's getting is her insecurities being sated, because I thought I would never get married. So that, again, that's all about her, nothing to do with him. Again, he is just like a canvas, right, on which people put their insecurities and demons. To
briefly go back to the film, another failing there is that his wife was perfectly pretty and nice.
Yeah,
she was like unmarriable.
I was going to say you can't really put her on film, because an important part of the book for her in particular is that you make what she looks like, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's
like you have you with your mind, you have to make her not completely hideous, but somewhat weirdly unappealing. That's different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have that problem with Montana Wild Hack, did they? Extremely 70s nudity in this thing.
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. And also
supposed to be
quite shocking
around
to see a naked child in a film. That was weird. So it's where he's like the story when his dad throws him in sink or swim in the pool, right? And it's like, and that's one of his first traumas because he nearly drowns. He's like, this is how I learned. It's like, did he need to have his bare ass out? Is that necessary?
Well,
Stick some trunks on the lad?
It might have just been that wasn't weird in the 70s, because I'm thinking like,
yes. Well, yeah.
I think like, you go back to old films like that, kids do just sort of frolic in the nude. So.
Right. Right. And that is, I was just like, oh, yeah, no, we don't do that anymore, do we? Look at that.
Stop.
Jesus. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
recently, recently the Baby on the Nevermind album tried to sue his parents. Or yes. No, I think he tried to sue Nirvana, but the court sort of decided, well, no, it's your parents who screwed you, not the band.
And also there were like multiple stories of him like chatting away about how cool it was and impressing people with it, like at various parties and things. Like we had a whole history of going, yeah, it was me and da-da-da. And yeah, suddenly thought, hey, I'm not cool with this now.
Get a few bucks here.
Although they actually held back a little bit, because in the book they just in the Space Dome they just run around naked all the time.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, they're censoring it, and then they get to the then they're like, oh no, they're not really censoring. I guess you can only do so much and keep your rating. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. It was a weird, like, again, they tried to sort of inject the humor in there, didn't they? Bringing down the night canvas, the night curtain for the
night canopy.
Thank you, that's it. Again, which isn't explained, but in the book it's because there's only 1 hour in every 60 or so that's nighttime on Trafalgar, and so they bring down this artificial night. But he just says night canopy. I suppose it doesn't really need explaining, but it's another one of those weird things that just turns up out of nowhere.
I always get that when I watch a film and I've read the book. I always find myself asking, yeah, but how does someone who hasn't read the book know what's going on? I guess
I think a good one. Yeah, I think a good adaptation, you don't need to have read it.
I always watch it with someone who hasn't read the book, and they apparently are fine.
I watched Submarine, the Richard Ayoade's
film, yeah.
And before I read it, and then I read the book, and that was a perfect adaptation. You know, there's extra stuff in the book, but it was more like cut content. Do you know what I mean? Like rather than and you didn't feel like you missed out on the sense of what the character was. And I felt the character Oliver Tate was the same in the book as is in the film. Like it gets it across perfectly, and you don't really miss anything. That I think that's how you do it.
Yeah, I'm just never quite sure if a film is doing that, or if I just because I can never experience it as someone who hasn't read the book.
Yeah,
So I'll never know. Like, we don't have the fourth person on this podcast who hasn't.
Yeah,
that's it. That's what I do.
Just in reverse order on purpose.
I don't know. I mean, what would be the way to if you were now on one of the streaming services and had some ridiculous budget to try and work with Slaughterhouse 5, how would you go about making it work? None of us being people that actually make movies, but
I guess I would give the whole film sort of a montagey, dreamlike feel. I'm trying to think of an example of something that does that. I don't think it would be a very good film necessarily. I think it can be filmed, but I don't think it just doesn't fit what you want from the structure of a film.
You lose so much
deliberately
not having his writing. You lose so much not having his narration and his descriptions of things, because those are just uniquely how he sees it, and that's not something you can put onto screen. Those
without having a load
opinions.
of narration, which would just read the book at that point.
Yeah.
Vonnegut's so clearly in the book and so clearly left out of the movie. So
right, yeah.
I don't think you can without just changing how you're going to approach it entirely. I think probably the mistake they made was to try and tell all the story in the first place. I think maybe they should have been taken more liberties with it than they did, instead of just trying to hit they were just trying to hit all the beats of what happened, even if you don't have much of a explanation as to why those things are there and how, and or what's trying to be said. So it is just a mad mess for most of it. I think that's why it doesn't work.
Ultimately, I guess you shouldn't make a film of it because it is very personal. Even though Billy Pilgrim is fictional and everything, it's clearly this is Vonnegut talking to the audience through this book, like almost one-on-one in a way. So to make a film version that Vonnegut's not involved with, I mean, I don't know how involved he was in this film, but obviously he wouldn't be involved now. Like, I'd rather see a director tell, their own personal story. I don't necessarily think the book lends itself to being remade.
Here's something weird about the movie. I watched it a couple nights ago, and I don't know if I've seen it before or not. Like, I've read the book 4 or 5 times. I've seen images from the movie for sure, like screenshots, but I'm like, have I must have watched it at some point, but I really do not know if I've watched this before.
Perfect.
That's funny. That's funny. It has a feeling of like a Jodorowsky sort of thing. It is that sort of 70s surrealness, isn't it? It is lots of batty ideas and slightly weirdly framed shots, and even the way it cuts between things feels a bit like a Jodorowsky. Like it's like, I don't know, it's something about
naked kids.
Yeah, see, there's the themes, right? there's some weird, shares some weird DNA like that, and like kind of the tracking shots that are a little bit too close, like they stuck the wrong lens on and they're sort of rushing to catch up with whatever they're filming, like to get that sense of speed. It's the stuff like that. There's loads of weird little things like that in it that make me think of those, and loads of non sequiturs that I explained.
that's where it's hard for me to even say like if this movie like holds up today or not. To me, it seems like you went to a really good play and they gave you like a relatively nice, slick program, and the movie is the program they gave you.
Yeah. It gets a bit better in the final half, I think. A little bit in
does, but I don't think Dresden in this film hit me.
No.
Because the book hit me. The book was a punch in the gut. And perhaps because you don't, like, if you added up all the words that are explicitly about Dresden in this book, it's like a page of A4.
Yeah.
But the entire rest of the story is, even when it's not about it, it is about it.
Well, it's that personal thing, like you said, because he sets it. Vonnegut sets out and says that I was there, so he was there. So when he pops up as himself in little bits,
It's like he can't tell you directly. He's got to make lots of jokes, but you can't make jokes about a horrible firebombing. So he's going about it as like, around the block as he can.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's probably why it hits home the same, because when Billy's in that bunker, that's not made up.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, fuck.
Oh.
I think that's basically it, Whereas with the film, you're looking at it like you might hear about war in the news. You think, oh, that's terrible, and you don't feel great about it, but you're not focusing on a single person experiencing that event,
I think it's, you read something super popular, it's like the aforementioned Stephen King books, or say Harry Potter books. You haven't seen the movies, and you have to construct, your visual language in your own head, right? And just to be able to get through it, right? I mean, that's a normal thing. But Slaughterhouse 5, it kind of requires, it's like you have to create this memory space, just like Billy Pilgrim's in, So Slaughterhouse 5 is absolutely going to read different for everybody, where Harry Potter is going to be the same story for pretty much everyone who reads it. But this book, it's like almost like a choose your own adventure book in the details,
Well, that's it. It's a choose your own adventure book in a world that doesn't have free will.
Yeah.
Yes.
You could put at the end of every time section, like, go to page whatever.
Go to the next page. That would be a good reprinting of Slaughterhouse 5, or someone should.
I like that.
Steal that idea.
I like that a lot.
But this is kind of an interactive book in a way, in that, like, really, what you are making, like, it's like your own personal biases color, like, what's happening in this book. How horrible the firebombing is depends entirely on how horrible you're making it,
Right.
Yeah. What I like about this book, and all his books really also, is that he is not above toilet humor or any funny little dirty joke, which it's funny in itself to just pepper it with that, but it's also important to put them in a way, because it shows you that everything that's happened to him, there's a positivity in there, and that it hasn't broken his spirit to the extent that he's no longer a human being. Do you know what I mean? He's not completely broken by the experience. He's managed to retain that sort of humanity. I know it's a slightly slightly grand way of looking at it, but like the fact that he can still be this funny is kind of warming, right?
Well, the character he ends up, Kurt Vonnegut himself, I get from this, reminds me of Maud from Harold and Maude, where she's so funny and happy and this bright light, and then you learn at the end it's because she's so incredibly sad at the center. And like, this book is very funny and wacky and fun because it's all built around this incredibly depressing center that it doesn't want to approach.
Yes.
It's, I guess, on the movie, my final thing is, if you are into the book, it is curious, basically just to see, because you've made such a vivid take of your own, having read the book, hopefully, then you just see someone else's take, and none of us really clicked with it that much, but it's fascinating to see someone's take on it.
Yeah. Like, I actually thought it was worth watching and enjoyed watching it, in terms of, like, it's 72? It's like 50 years old, the film itself, which is wild in itself to think about.
Oh, right? Yeah, because we've done this as the 100th anniversary of the book of Vonnegut. It's the 50th anniversary of the film.
50th anniversary of the film, which is crazy enough on itself, right, to think about. So it is fascinating to watch all the way through, like, even just as an artifact, right, and an attempt to make sense of a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any final thoughts you want to throw on the book or the movie? I'm basically just bringing that up because I very prosaically, I have to wash the dishes and then do another podcast. So.
I guess just not really on the book or the film, but I just want to get out of my system, because that's what this book did for me. Was I very much grew up in the UK being taught in World War II, the Germans were baddies and we were goodies.
Yeah.
And they did this horrible thing called the Blitz, and then we went over and liberated Europe. And I I guess growing up, you did hear about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, always with the, it shortened the war and saved millions of American lives addendum. And then, all in this space of like 2 months where I read I think I lent it to you, Matt, and it was too depressing to read because you were in hospital. That huge book about Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes.
I visited both cities and read this, and it was just like, yeah, sure. I guess if you literally just look at the leaders of the two countries, we were probably on the right side and should have won. But like, there's no good guys in a war, especially when you start bombing civilians.
The secondary, finish your point.
The idea that like Britain is so great because it resisted the Blitz, but that we thought we could do the same things to Germany and it would break their spirits, is just ridiculous arrogance.
Yeah.
And like that line of thinking has stuck with Britain for the past, 70 years. And we still think we're fighting World War II and the best country on earth as we just, plummet.
Not like the Deep South where they're still fighting the Civil War. But I was going to say the other reason I wasn't reading in the hospital is because then I would have been an American in a Japanese hospital reading that book, which would have looked a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was in the museum in Nagasaki, a bus full of American tourists came in and talked really loudly through the whole museum. And I wanted to just scream at them, guys, if there's one place to not be an American, it's here. Tone it down, please. Just these boomers just swanning around loudly chatting about lunch.
Jeez.
Well, Maddie and I pulled that in the onsen yesterday. We were sitting there, washing yourself before you get on the bath, and apparently we were talking way too loud, and someone told us that. I got told off with Matty when we were playing Monster Hunter on a bus and talking too loud. So I think that's just Matty. Winding into the gate, I guess then. So shall we tell everyone where they're at?
Yeah, Gary, where can people find you these days?
I mean, how long is Twitter gonna last? But if you want to find me on there, it's at Gary Dutton, GaryDooton. It's not my real name, but don't worry about it. That's where I do most of my tweeting. I've got a podcast called Making Games is Fun, which I think there's some sci-fi and video game fan crossover, isn't there?
There usually is.
Which is one or two. And I interview game developers and people interested in games in one way or another, or whose lives are affected, shall we say, by computer games, about whatever we want to chat about. And that is everything you need to know about me.
Yeah, you'll find us on Twitter at Elon Musk. I did just see the news. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to do our real plugs, but you can chat shit about Elon Musk if you want. I'm never interrupt that.
No, I just woke up this morning and saw that Kathy Griffin had been kicked off Twitter for impersonating Elon Musk, as many people are doing this
Loads
week.
of people have.
Yeah.
You can find us on Twitter at MLSFS Pod. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you like and subscribe, blah, blah, blah. If you want to help support the podcast, keep it online. You can go to patreon.com/podcastio-podcastius. There you'll find links to the other podcasts we make, like Matt's Twilight Zone podcast, Time Enough. This film reminded me of Twilight Zone in that Twilight Zone keeps reminding me that every single person you see on screen in the 60s fought in World War II.
Yeah.
It's like, just they could just treat that as just a thing that everyone knew about because they all did it.
Our greatest generation.
There's also gaming stuff on our podcast network. You can check out Luke Loves Pokemon, podcast about Pokemons. Check out Monster Mash, podcast about Monster Hunter, or the Game Show, a game show about games, trying to capture that British panel show energy. Matt, how do you describe this podcast?
4 British guys screaming insults at each other.
There you go. Well, maybe you're listening to this 100 years in the future.
Today.
Maybe you'll listen to this 100 years in the future. We're all dead, but so it goes.
So it goes.
Okay, there's my recorder button. Hit stop. Hit stop.